I've never talked about it often, but I am here for this reason. So, it's been haunting me for too long, and maybe sharing it will help me make sense of it. I'm 37 now, a painter by trade, but my real story started years ago, with a trauma I can't fully remember. Or at least, I couldn't remember it until recently. I've always been considered a gifted artist. My work has been displayed in galleries, and I've made a decent living from it. But for as long as I can remember, there's been this blank spot in my mind. A chunk of my childhood that's just gone. My parents never talked about it, and every time I tried to remember, I'd get this overwhelming sense of dread, like my mind was protecting me from something too terrible to face. A few months ago, I heard about this new experimental treatment. It was supposed to help people recover repressed memories. The idea was to unlock parts of your mind that were shut away, revealing traumas that could then be confronted and healed. I thought maybe, just maybe, it could help me. I signed up for the treatment and was accepted into the program. It involved a series of sessions with a machine that looked like something out of a sci-fi movie, all wires and blinking lights. They hooked me up to it and ran some tests, and then the real treatment began. The first few sessions were uneventful. I felt a little strange, like I was drifting in and out of a dream, but nothing major happened. Then, on the 4th session, everything changed. As soon as they turned on the machine, I felt this intense pressure in my head. It was like someone was trying to pry open my skull. I could see flashes of light behind my closed eyes, and then the memories started flooding in. But they weren't my memories. I saw images of people I didn't recognize, places I'd never been. It was overwhelming, like my mind was being invaded by strangers. I told the doctors, but they dismissed it as a side effect of the treatment. They said it was my mind's way of processing the trauma, that these images would eventually make sense. But they didn't. They just kept coming, more vivid and more disturbing with each session. I started painting what I saw. It was the only way I could make sense of it. My studio became a gallery of other people's memories. A woman crying on a bridge, a child hiding in a closet, a man running through a forest. They were all so real, so vivid. But they weren't mine. One night, after a particularly intense session, I had a dream. I was in a dark room, and I could hear someone whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but the voice was familiar. It was soothing, almost comforting. I followed the sound, and the room started to change. The walls became lined with old photographs, and I realized they were all pictures of me. But in each one, there was a shadowy figure standing behind me, watching. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding. I tried to shake it off, but the dream stayed with me. I couldn't get the image of that shadowy figure out of my mind. It was like it had been there all along, lurking in the background, just out of sight. The next day, I skipped my treatment session. I needed to clear my head, to get away from the machine and the memories. I went for a walk, trying to focus on the present. But everywhere I went, I felt like I was being watched. It was a subtle feeling, like a prickling at the back of my neck. I kept looking over my shoulder, but there was never anyone there. When I got back to my studio, I found a new painting on my easel. I didn't remember starting it, but there it was, a portrait of the shadowy figure from my dream. It was standing in the doorway of my childhood home, its eyes glowing with a sickly yellow light. I stared at the painting, trying to make sense of it. How had I painted this without realizing it? And why did it feel so familiar? I decided to confront my parents, to ask them about my missing memories. Maybe they could help me understand what was happening. When I arrived at their house, they seemed nervous, like they knew why I was there. I asked them about my childhood, about the blank spot in my memory. They exchanged a glance, and then my father sighed. "We didn't want to tell you," he said. "We thought it was best if you forgot." "Forgot what?" I asked, my heart pounding. My mother took a deep breath. "When you were 8, you disappeared for a week. We searched everywhere, but you were just gone. And then, one day, you came back. You didn't remember where you'd been or what had happened. The doctors said it was some kind of trauma, that your mind had blocked it out to protect you." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean, I disappeared?" My father looked away. "There was something else. When you came back, you weren't alone. You kept talking about a friend, someone who had been with you. But we never saw anyone." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We thought it was just your imagination, a way of coping with whatever had happened. But now, I'm not so sure." I left their house in a daze, my mind racing. Had the shadowy figure been with me all this time? Was it responsible for the missing week in my childhood? And what did it want from me now? I went back to the studio and stared at the painting. The figure seemed to be watching me, its eyes following me wherever I went. I tried to ignore it, to focus on my work, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Over the next few days, the memories became more intense. I saw images of people I didn't know, places I'd never been. And always, there was the shadowy figure, lurking in the background. I started to feel like I was losing my mind, like I was being consumed by other people's lives. I knew I needed to stop the treatment, to get away from the machine. But when I called the clinic, they told me it was too late. The process had already begun, and stopping now could be dangerous. I felt trapped, like I was being pulled into a nightmare I couldn't escape. I started having hallucinations, seeing the shadowy figure everywhere I went. It would appear in the corner of my eye, just for a moment, and then disappear. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I was consumed by fear. One night, as I was painting, I felt a sudden surge of anger. I grabbed a brush and started slashing at the canvas, trying to destroy the image of the shadowy figure. But no matter how hard I tried, it wouldn't go away. The paint seemed to come alive, swirling around the figure, protecting it. I fell to the floor, exhausted and terrified. And then, in the silence, I heard the whispering again. It was the same voice from my dream, soothing and familiar. I closed my eyes, trying to block it out, but the voice grew louder. "You can't escape me," it said. "I am a part of you." I opened my eyes and saw the shadowy figure standing over me. Its eyes were glowing with a sickly yellow light, and I felt a surge of terror. I tried to crawl away, but it reached out and touched my forehead. Suddenly, I was flooded with memories. Not just mine, but countless others. I saw faces, places, events, all flashing through my mind at lightning speed. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of memories, unable to breathe. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. I was back in my studio, lying on the floor. The shadowy figure was gone, but I could still feel its presence, lurking in the corners of my mind. I knew I had to confront it, to understand what it was and why it was haunting me. I started researching parasitic entities, looking for anything that could explain what was happening. I found stories of creatures that fed on memories, that consumed people's lives and left them empty shells. The more I learned, the more I realized that my own suppressed trauma held the key to stopping it. I had to remember what had happened during that missing week in my childhood. I had to confront the darkness that had taken root in my mind. I went back to the clinic and demanded another session. The doctors were hesitant, but I insisted. I needed to face whatever was hiding in my mind, to understand it and stop it from consuming me. They hooked me up to the machine, and I felt the familiar pressure in my head. The memories started flooding in, more intense than ever. I saw the shadowy figure, felt its presence. And then, I saw myself as a child, standing in a dark room. I was holding hands with someone, but when I looked up, there was no one there. Just the shadowy figure, watching me with its glowing eyes. I felt a surge of fear, but also a strange sense of familiarity. This was the memory I had been repressing, the trauma that had shaped my life. The figure spoke, its voice echoing in my mind. "You belong to me," it said. "I have been with you since that day, feeding on your memories. And now, I will consume you completely." I felt a wave of terror, but also a spark of defiance. I had to fight back, to reclaim my mind. I focused on the memory, on the details of the room, the figure, the fear. I felt the pressure in my head intensify, like a battle was being fought inside my mind. And then, suddenly, it was over. The figure was gone, and I was back in the present. I felt a sense of relief, but also a deep exhaustion. The doctors unhooked me from the machine, and I stumbled out of the clinic, my mind reeling. I don't know if I defeated the entity, or if it's still lurking in the shadows, waiting for another chance to consume me. But I do know that I've reclaimed my memories, my life. I've started painting again, but this time, the images are mine. No more shadowy figures, no more other people's memories. I still feel a sense of unease, like a part of me is missing. But I'm trying to move on, to live my life without the fear that has haunted me for so long. I don't know if sharing my story will help someone, but maybe it will bring me some peace.